Hi, this is Pushpa Naurim, and today we are going to discuss real business cycle. Have you ever wondered why economies experience periods of boom and recessions? Well, the real business cycles offer an interesting perspective on this phenomenon. It suggests that the fluctuations in the economy occur as a result of shock stemming from real factors rather than changes in aggregate demand. This perspective was put forward by new classical economists who argue that the variations in the aggregate supply of goods and services are underlying cause of business cycle. So what does this mean? To understand this properly, here certain terms are coming up which we need to understand a little bit first. First, the real factors, the aggregate demand and the aggregate supply of goods and services. This term we need to first understand it before trying to understand the real business cycle theory. So, what are the real factors? Real factors, it refers to the fundamental elements of the economy that influence productions, employment, and overall economic activity. As such, it is tangible, measurable, and physical element that influence economic activities and outcome. Real factors include productivity. For example, changes in productivity, often referred to as productivity shock, can arise from technological advancement, changes in production technique, or improvement in the skill and knowledge of workers. So again, you see, with the advancement in technology, which ultimately can lead to the development of new productions process, machinery or products, which can increase the overall efficiency and output in the economy. So technology here is the real factor. Then another real factor that we can discuss here is the labor supply. Changes in labor supply such as shift in population's demographic, participation rate or government policy affecting labor market dynamics can have a significant effect on productions level and employment of the economy. Then there is capital accumulations. Increase in the capital stock can enhance productivity and expand the economic production's capacity, while on the other hand, inadequate investment can constrain economic activity or economic growth. So, capital accumulations is another real factor that we are going to take into considerations while we discuss real business cycle. And there is natural resources. You see, the availability and quality of natural resources such as land, minerals, and energy sources are real factors that can impact productions and economic activities. Now, having discussed what comprises of real factors, there are two more terms that we need to understand in order to discuss the real business cycle. First one being the aggregate supply. Aggregate supply is an economy's gross domestic product, that is GDP, or the total amount of nation produces and sell. Then we have aggregate demand. Aggregate demand, it refers to the total amount spent on domestic goods and services in an economy. So now, having discussed this important concept and terms that will be coming in the following discussions, we are now in the positions of understanding the real business cycle. The basic assumption of real business cycle is that total output at time t is the functions of capital and labor at time t, where at in this equation you see it represent the state of technology, or you can simply take it as a technology shocked at time t, and any changes in at, it will causes shift in the production functions. The technology shock change factor productivity in terms of labor and capital or both, that leads to the change in output for given level of labor and capital inputs. The technology shocked, also known as supply shocked, it may be positive or negative. You see, a positive technology shocked, it increases factor productivity and thereby it raises the real GDP. On the other hand, a negative technology shocked, it causes a decline in factor productivity and thereby reduces real GDP. Based on these equations, what real business cycle says is that given the amount of capital and labor at time t, output level increases due to positive technology shock. Now, let's try to understand about how positive technological shock increases the level of total output at time t given the amount of capital and labor at time t. Here in this diagram you see this equation represents the initial production functions where, as we have discussed earlier, A naught t it represents the state of technology at time t. So given this initial production functions with the level of labor input L naught, Y naught level of output is produced. Now let's assume that there is a positive technological shock in the economy. As a result of which the production function shifted upward. Now you see, as a result of the technological shock, with the same use of the labor input of L naught, the level of output has increased to Y1 dash. Okay, you see, with the upward shift in the production functions due to technological shock, the production functions also become steeper compared to this initial production functions. And you need to remember that the slope of the production functions at a given input level, it measures the marginal product of an input. From this understanding, it shows that the marginal product of labor will be greater at point F on the new production functions compared to point E on the initial production functions. You see, it is the rise in the labor productivity due to positive technological shock that even with given labor input of L naught, output rises from Y naught to Y1 dash. However, as marginal product of labor at the given labor input of L naught rises in a competitive economy, this will lead to rise in the real wage rate. This rise in real wage will lead to increase in the labor input from L naught to L1. More labor input or more labor employment will cause to rise in the level of output to Y1. Okay. Now, the worker must decide how this increase in the total output has to be distributed between consumptions and saving. Okay, usually worker will consume a part of additional output and a part will be saved. As a result, saving in particular time t will increase as a result of higher output brought about by the positive technological shock. Now, as a result of the positive technological shock, what happened is that the level of saving will increase in certain time period, and this will lead to increase in investment that will cause additions to the stock of capital in the next period. So basically, saving at time period t, it will lead to increase in investment at time period t. On the other hand, let's say if the economy faces negative technological shock, and this negative technological shock will cause decline in the level of output and the level of employment in the economy. Okay, and this decline in the level of output and employment, this will happen not only in one period, but its effect will persist longer for some more periods in the economy. Now, let's see how technological shock it affect the real GDP and price level in real business cycle. You see in this diagram, along the x-axis, it represents the level of output, and along the y-axis, it represents the level of price. Okay, and LAS naught and LAS1, it represent the long-run supply curve, and AD naught and AD1, it represent the aggregate demand curve. Okay. You see in this diagram the initial, the long run aggregate supply curve and the aggregate demand curve, they intersected at point E. So point E is the initial equilibrium point. Now let's assume that there is a positive technological shock in the economy. As a result of the positive technological shock, this will lead to increase in labor productivity and increase in employment. The expansion in employment bring about increase in the potential real GDP, which causes increase in aggregate supply. This increase in aggregate supply resulted in the shift of long-run aggregate supply from LAS0 to LAS1. So, to repeat myself, the positive technological shock, this will raise the labor productivity, then it will lead to expansions in output, which is divided between the increase in consumptions and the saving. As a result of higher saving and investment in the economy, it causes the rightward shift in the aggregate demand curve from AD0 to AD1. Now, there is one more important thing that we need to consider is that in real business cycle, there is no short-run aggregate supply curve, since it is assumed that money wage rate is quite flexible and adjusts freely so that real wage rate keeps labor market in equilibrium. Therefore, what happens is that in real business cycle theory, long-run aggregate supply is always vertical at the potential GDP level where there is full employment of labor. In this diagram, you see that the initial equilibrium is at point A, at which the potential real GDP is at Y0 and the price level is at P0. And let's say that there is a positive technological shock taking place in the economy, because of which long-run aggregate supply curve will shift it to the right. Likewise, aggregate demand curve will also shift it to the right, and thereby establishing a new equilibrium at point H. And potential GDP income, therefore, it increases to Y1, and the price level also increases to P1. This means that there is an economic expansions taking place in the economy. So, in brief, what does real business cycle theory explains? It explains that changes in technology and the availability of resources have a big impact on how well the economy performs. These changes affect how much we can produce and influence the overall supply of goods and services. When there is a shift in the technology or resources, it causes the economy to go through cycle of ups and downs, and this cycle are called business cycles. The real business cycle theory focus on these changes in the supply side of the economy as they play a major role in shaping its performance. So that's it, and in this video we have discussed about real business cycle and how the technological changes it led to the increase in the level of output and employment, and how change in real GDP and price level take place in real business cycle. I hope you find this video helpful. Thank you for stopping by.